So I am Mexican. Both my parents were Mexican, and my family is originally from a place in Mexico called Monterrey, and all my family lived there. Both my mother's relatives and my father's relatives, because interestingly enough, my parents are first cousins. In about 1913, 1912, something like that, there was a major revolution in Mexico, and some people were, as in all revolutions, their sides, and the La Garza family owned different. They were merchants, and they had a coffee plantation, and at any rate, at some point, my grandfather may have become politically involved, and was. I'm not sure if he was actually targeted by Madero's people. I'm not sure of all the historical lines and who was where, and there were a number of presidents at that time in Mexico, and his life was in danger. And because he was already married and they had two young children, and my grandmother was expecting twins, they stayed in Mexico until the twins were born. One of those twins was my father. And then they came by train to San Antonio, Texas, and they were basically leaving because of the revolution. So my grandfather followed on horseback. The family legend is that he came with bags of gold, and they had several because you had to have something when you came to another country. You had to have something to live on, and they lived with some difficulty initially, but somehow or other my grandfather continued with the same kind of business that they had in Mexico, which in Spanish is called an almacén de abarrotes, which means they were wholesale grocers. And they provided dry goods to people. And that's what my grandfather knew, and they continued doing that. And they moved from San Antonio to Brownsville, Texas. And of course, the way I tell the story and the way my children have learned it is that Pancho Villa was their arch enemy. How there are other areas and other people for whom Pancho Villa is a wonderful hero. For my family, he was the villain because he was the reason they left. But what's always puzzled me is why a whole branch of the family did not leave and stayed in Mexico, because it was not across the board that all of them had to leave. And my grandfather had brothers who stayed in Mexico. But for whatever reason, and the way I understand it is that there may have been some political embroilment, whether it was, I guess my aunt told me once that it was a case of mistaken identity, that he was mistaken for someone else, and that was why they were after him. And I've never been clear on that, and I'm not quite sure what the accuracy of that story is. I never really got it straight. How I came to Syracuse was that I went to undergraduate school in Texas, but then at some point I went to Duke University to get a master's in English. And I had a roommate there who introduced me to the possibility of living in Syracuse, because it's, all I had to do with boyfriends and connections and jobs. And I ended up coming to Syracuse to avoid a Mexican boyfriend. Anyway, and I stayed here and worked for about 9 months, and then I met my husband, and the rest is history, as they always say.